This is in no way my attempt to justify my comic book obsession. And this story, I really, really like. Artwork, the storytelling. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Pull List. My name is Travis. Let's talk about Millarworld. I was going to be talking about part 3 of Revolutions of Terror today, but that video might have to be pushed back a little bit because this news about Millarworld is pretty big. And that's because the publisher Millarworld has been sold to the streaming giant Netflix. Millarworld, if you're not aware, is a creator-owned imprint of comics created by Scottish author Mark Millar. Comic titles under the imprint Millarworld include Jupiter's Legacy, Chrononauts, Nemesis, Starlight, but if you're more of a mainstream comics fan, you might recognize some of Mark Millar's other works, Kick-Ass, Wanted, Kingsman. We all know that live-action comic book films have been made for years, but there's been a big boom of live-action comic book properties ever since the success of the original X-Men. Wanted was loosely adapted by Universal Pictures in 2008. Kick-Ass was adapted in 2010, and its sequel came out in 2013. Millar is even responsible for writing the 2008 comic series Civil War, which was loosely adapted into Captain America: Civil War. Very, very loosely adapted. And Millar wrote the Old Man Logan comic series, which again was very loosely adapted into this year's Logan. But the fact that Netflix is purchasing Millarworld is a huge deal for the comic genre. But unfortunately, this deal does not include Kick-Ass or Kingsman, as they are jointly owned properties. A lot of Millar's work is violent and controversial, and some of it is just downright disturbing. But I feel that Netflix is the perfect place for his work. Millarworld is very creator-oriented, and Netflix has a strong history of letting the creators just have a lot of freedom. And we're all very aware that a cinematic universe is something that a lot of studios have been trying to achieve in the past few years. Companies see how Marvel made it work, and they want to try it themselves. Even the Universal monsters are getting involved. But here's the thing, Millarworld is already pre-packaged and ready to go. Not only does Millar's work have a nice tendency to just translate very well to the screen when done correctly, but back in 2014, Mark Millar announced that Millarworld is all connected. Wanted explains how the world used to have superheroes, but they were all defeated and killed in 1986, and we just remember them as pop culture icons. Kick-Ass is a story about a kid who lives in a world without superheroes, but he becomes a superhero and his actions cause superpowered beings to just start coming out of the woodwork. Which then brings us to Nemesis, MPH, Superior. They are all connected. And the fact that these properties are all connected is wonderful news for a company like Netflix. But unfortunately, like I said, this deal doesn't include Kick-Ass or Kingsman. Which is too bad because having a Kick-Ass miniseries would have been fantastic and bring us the possibility of even having a Hit Girl miniseries. Clearly, this acquisition has something to do with Netflix's success with Marvel properties such as Jessica Jones or Daredevil. The problem is that the average Netflix viewer isn't as familiar with Jupiter's Legacy or Empress or Reborn or Huck. But Netflix can bring those properties to the forefront of entertainment for their 100 million plus viewer base. Think about what Marvel was able to do with Iron Man. Netflix essentially did sort of the same thing with Jessica Jones on a much smaller scale, but it was a pretty big deal. And the fact that Disney is planning its own streaming service by 2019 means that those Marvel shows will no longer have a home on Netflix. So Netflix having a new series of comic properties, Millarworld, to fill that comic property void makes sense. Not only does it mean that Netflix will own the rights to those properties, but Netflix is also securing original content, something that a lot of Netflix subscribers just eat up in droves. Right now, we don't know what Netflix's plans are with Millarworld, but it's safe to assume that since they are acquiring an entire comic publisher, that they do have a shared universe in mind. In the comments down below, let me know your thoughts on Netflix acquiring Millarworld. Do you think it's amazing? Do you think it's horrible? Is this the first time you've ever actually heard of Millarworld? I know that there are a lot of people out there who have probably never heard of some of these comic book properties, but if Netflix does this correctly, hopefully they will become a little more mainstream, because some of these stories are fantastic and I cannot wait for them to be translated from page to screen. That's it for this episode of the Pull List. My name is Travis. Thank you for fueling my comic book obsession, and you will see me tomorrow.